All right. So you know what's weird with this year's playoffs is alphabetically, a lot of teams from A through M missed the playoffs. And then when you get into who got knocked out in the first round, Calgary is first in alphabetical order, and then Nashville. So, and then towards the bottom of the alphabet, you got Vegas, Winnipeg, Washington, all got knocked out in the first round. Like it's weird. And for all the conspiracy theorists out there, have at her. Nashville's an interesting case. So Nashville's a team that seems to get a bigger reputation every year as being tough and a contender, but the playoff results are going backwards. So going back 2 years, they had 94 points in the regular season, 41, 29, and 12 record, and of course they were a finalist. But in the regular season, they were 11th in goals for and 15th in goals against. So the numbers were muddled and middling at best. Then last year they end up 53, 18, and 11. They win all of the pennants that they put up at the start of the following season, but they didn't win the cup. So they get 117 points. They end up in round two before getting knocked out by the Jets. Goals for that year, they were seventh. Goals against, they were second. This year, they take a step back, but they still win the division. So because the Central ends up being a division you win with fewer points, I don't know. See, they're 47, 29, and 6 this year with 100 points. That's only 6 better than when they were a number 2 wild card and they were favored to get wiped out by Chicago, and then they swept them on their way to a Stanley Cup final. They were out in round 1 this year, of course. That's why we're here. Goals for, they were 19th, and goals against, they were 3rd. And there's definitely some issues when it comes to Nashville and their attack. Goaltending, I don't think is the problem. And I know we're going to get into that, but I don't think goaltending is really the problem here. And defense, I don't think is the problem either. 15th here, but second and third tells you their defense and their goaltending are pretty good. The attack, however, I think they need to work on. Now, Nashville fans are going to point out, and they're right, Forsberg missed a lot of time. Arvidsson missed a lot of time. Arvidsson could have scored 50 if he'd played all year, which would have helped that number. But I've always thought that for the $8 million a year that Johansson gets, I don't know that Johansson produces worth $8 million a year, and that's been an issue I've had since this channel started. I think Johansson. I like Johansson, but I do think he's a bit overpaid. Now, when you look at their contracts, Kyle Turris stands out with his $6 million a year until 2024. He signed that right after he came over from Ottawa. The Sens were offering him more money. And when you look back at it in retrospect, he might have been better off in Ottawa and paying a little bit extra in taxes. I'm aware it's more than a little bit. And, than he has been in Nashville. Because in Nashville, it really hasn't quite worked. It has been just a little bit off since he got there. However, while we're talking about contracts, I can't avoid mentioning Arvidsson because Arvidsson's a bargain at $4.25 million also until 2024. So while the Turris contract stands out as one that's a little bit high, the Arvidsson one stands out as one that's pretty fantastic. And then there's Subban, and we're going to hear a lot about Subban over the next few months, I think. I'm not saying they will move him, just that they very well could. So, Subban at $9 million until 2022 may very well end up being an odd guy out here because you've got Ellis, you've got Yossi, you've got Ekholm. And now we've got Dante Fabro stepping in. Now, I'm not saying Fabro's going to step into top 4 right away, but the pressure's going to be there that Fabro's on an entry-level contract, and if you can find somebody to take the Subban contract, and there will be takers. And there's already a lot of Toronto media saying, oh, he'd work here. And honestly, Subban in Toronto would likely be... It could go either way. That's one of those things where the media would absolutely love him, then he has a bad game, and then it's just... Anybody who's played in Toronto knows how that works. And Toronto fans know how that works as well. I'm not saying he does get traded. It's just if they decide to move somebody, it would likely be a blue liner. Ellis's extension kicks in this summer. I can't see Ellis being the guy who's on the way out. Ekholm had a really good year. I know his playoffs were middling, but he had a really good season, regular season. And Yossi isn't going anywhere. So if they decided to move somebody, it would likely be one of the guys on the blue line because they don't have a forward that they can part with when they're already 19th in goals for. So it's going to be a tricky balancing act for David Poile. And honestly, that $9 million makes a difference because if we look at the salary cap for next year, according to Cap Friendly, they're already at $76.8 million for next year. The salary cap's supposed to go up to $83 million, but that gives them the least amount of cap space out of almost any team that I've talked about so far. Now, on the upside, they're not losing any core players this summer, but Simmons is UFA, Boyle's UFA, and Cody McLeod's UFA. So those three all become pure rentals. Unless they can get Boyle to come back for around the same as he made this year. I don't think Simmons really 100% fit in with Nashville. I could see Simmons going back to Philly this summer, to be honest. Grimaldi is a restricted free agent with arbitration rights, and Colton Sissons gets arbitration rights as well. Sissons will get a raise. I don't know how much. Grimaldi, well, he looked pretty darn good in the playoffs, but it might be one of those things where it was lightning in a bottle and he won't be able to recreate it next year. It's going to be interesting to see what David Poile does. Because when you look at the prospects list, Tolvanen's still there. Tolvanen may very well step in next year, but Tolvanen struggled. So, is Tolvanen going to be that answer for the top six or not? And that's a question that they have to answer. And then, of course, as I said, Dante Fabro stepped in on the blue line in the playoffs and was pretty solid from what I saw. Did pretty well for them. So I think there's some room there to get rid of a contract or two. That's why Turris and Subban are on the board. They're the ones that would make the most sense if they're going to start trying to save some money. And I know, like, PK Subban loves it in Nashville and he wants to stay, and I think Nashville enjoys having him there. It's just that at that price tag, I don't know that works. Now, if we look at what happened this year, as of November 10th, this team was 13-3. So they were 10 games above 500 as of November 10th. Now, they end up finishing the season 18 games above 500, so they were only 8 games above 500 after that. This is where that fast start comes in. And not just that, but between March 25th and April 6th, they won 5 of their last 6. And if you go back far enough, they won 10 of the last 15 games they played overall. So they finished strong, they started really strong, and in the middle, they struggled to be 500. And so Nashville is a team that David Poile has to figure out how this riddle is going to be solved. You understand that you probably overachieve in this middle season. The finals, that was probably a bit of a lucky streak as well. Probably set the bar higher. And now you've got a team that's had back-to-back 100-point seasons. But what are they going into next season? Because you don't have a lot of cap space to make things better unless you move somebody out. And again, I think they could use another top 6 forward. I think that there's a danger that they could fall further next year. Pekka Rinne is going to be an interesting case study next season. His cap hit drops by $2 million. He goes from $7 million to $5 million. But they've got Saros, who's at $1.5 million for next year and the year after. Saros may end up looking like a huge bargain. Losing round 1 to Dallas, they had 12 goals in those 6 games, and they allowed 18. Yes, there were a couple of meltdowns by Pekka Rinne mixed in there, but overall, it just didn't feel like they had enough to take Dallas out. The killer instinct that was with this team that had 94 points didn't seem to exist with the team with 100. And, of course, in 2018's playoffs, it was a meltdown by Pekka Rinne that was most remembered from that run, because Winnipeg just took them apart. So we'll see what they do this summer and going into next season. But I'd be interested to know what you guys think. So let me know in the comment section below what you think. Nashville next season, do they stay up near the top? Can they get back to the top? Or are they headed down? Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.